Okay, welcome to our March Advisor webinar, and this webinar is focused on the Delta Upsilon Educational Foundation. Let me first just say thank you to all the folks that are serving Delta Upsilon as advisors. I mean, our local volunteers are just so critical every year to the fraternity experience, so thank you for all that you all do in supporting our undergraduates and our chapters. My name is Ryan King, and I serve as the Associate Executive Director to DU, and my focus is really on leading the Delta Upsilon Educational Foundation. Although I'm new to the DU staff, I actually just joined the staff this past January. I spent my prior 17 years working for my fraternity, which is Beta Theta Pi. I did about 8 years working in our education department, and then 9 years working with Theta's foundation, beginning back in 2001. So although I'm not an official member of Delta Upsilon, I've always had such great respect for DU. There's always been great people serving, both on the staff side and the volunteer side. And I just really love all of the progress DU's made and the great educational programming that you all offer. So again, although I'm not a member, the values of friendship, character, culture, and justice really excite me personally, and that was why I said yes when asked to join the team. So that's a little bit about me, but now let's jump in and talk about what we're going to cover during the webinar. So today, we're going to spend some time first reviewing the purpose of the Delta Upsilon Educational Foundation and talking about how it relates to the fraternity. I'm going to highlight the main funding sources in the foundation and specifically how they are used to advance DU's mission. I'm going to talk about ways you as advisors can be foundation advocates and partners. And last but not least, I'll do my best to answer any questions that you have. So if you have questions, like I said, during the logistical intro, definitely type them in. I'll have some natural breaks over the next 30 minutes or so to kind of stop and see if there are any questions. And again, happy to have follow-up conversations with folks if I'm not able to get to them. So let's start and dive in talking specifically about the Delta Upsilon Educational Foundation. So what specifically does the DUEF do each year? And the easiest way to sum up the work of the foundation is just to say that we advance the fraternity's mission in building better men. And we do that by trying to bring to life those DU founding principles. And all of the foundation's activity can really be summed up in 4 main areas. The first is cultivation. Obviously, the promotion of friendship is a main value of Delta Upsilon, and our goal as a foundation, first and foremost, is to be a relationship organization. We really want to build strong friendships and relationships with our alumni, parents, friends of Delta Upsilon, even undergraduates that are passionate about our mission to build better men. So first and foremost, we cultivate. After we build those relationships, second, the foundation solicits. We ask folks to give gifts to the foundation so we can use those gifts to build better men. Thankfully, year after year, we've had strong support from alumni, parents, and friends that answer that call. And we've built those relationships and asked those people to give. And each year, we put that money to good use. So we cultivate, we ask people to give back. And once we receive those gifts, number 3, we make an impact with that gift. So the foundation's role is not to just raise money and sit on it. We want to raise the money and actually spend it. That's the fun and exciting part. We use it to advance the mission for the organization. We make a difference on our undergraduates, and it's our role as a foundation to show the donors how we've made an impact with each gift that we receive. So after we cultivate, we ask people to give, we use the funds and show that we've made an impact. The last thing we do is we say thank you as a foundation. We recognize our supporters each year. And the cycle that exists in the development world is something that we really care about and try to focus on as a foundation. We first and foremost cultivate and build relationships. We ask people to give. Once they do, we put their dollars to work. We show them that we made an impact, and we say thank you. And really our success as a foundation depends on this annual cycle because every year we have a new crop of undergraduates. We have officer turnover, sometimes volunteer turnover, and we want to invest in every every year's group of undergraduates that need development, training, and all the educational resources that the foundations provide. So if we do this cycle well as a foundation over time, we hope to and feel like we have built strong relationships with many of our supporters, and we really create an exciting donor experience that alums feel a part of all the great work that we're doing, namely to advance our mission of building better men. So that's just a quick overview of what the main components are of the work of the foundation. But another question that we often get is, how does the Delta Upsilon fraternity relate to the Delta Upsilon Foundation? How are they similar? How are they different? And at a high level, they actually are two completely separate organizations. The foundation and fraternity are legally separate. We have a fraternity organization and we have a 501c3 foundation. Although they are legally separate, we like to say that they are married in purpose. And that married in purpose really comes back to having a shared mission to build better men through friendship, character, culture, and justice. So both organizations work towards that mission and believe in advancing that mission. They're just done in a little bit different ways based on the structure of each organization. So let me explain this just a little bit further. So the fraternity that is over here in the upper corner, chapters pay dues to the fraternity side of the organization, and those dues are set, I believe, by the legislation that's passed at the undergraduate convention at the Leadership Institute each year. And that dues money can really be used for anything to advance the cause of the fraternity, whether that's educational things, non-educational things. So dues that come into the fraternity side are used for things like risk management, publishing the quarterly, the cornerstone, ritual books, staff support, recruitment work, expanding of new chapters, the website, all the things that help the fraternity really exist and support all of our chapters. That's where that dues money goes to. On the flip side, we also have a foundation, and that foundation is a 501c3 organization. And each year, the funds that the foundation receives don't come from undergraduate dues, they come from charitable gifts from our donors. And these are tax-deductible gifts that come from supporters that believe in that mission. And those funds, although they are used to advance the fraternity, they can only be used for educational things. So the foundation can only spend our gifts that we receive on educational activity, such as Leadership Institute scholarships for students, the dual experience, Delta U's Emerging Leaders program. We've got Building Better Men retreats, tuition scholarships, a laundry list of educational programs that I'm sure you all as advisors are well aware of, but the foundation can only spend those resources on educational things. In a nutshell, the goal of the foundation is to get to the point where we can subsidize all educational aspects of the fraternity. So the foundation exists to support the fraternity. So there is really a hierarchy here. The foundation's role is to find a way to raise the funds to offset the educational costs of all the activity the fraternity wants to do based on the strategic plan. So that's the similarities and differences between the two, and I'm going to explain it just a little bit further here on the relationship, specifically how the success of one fuels the success of the other. So if you think about Delta Upsilon as a fraternity, when the fraternity performs well, and what does that look like? Well, that means, we have thriving chapters, have high membership, there's strong GPA for the organization, when there's proper self-governance happening at the local level, when chapters are leaders on campus. When the fraternity does all those things well, what does that do? Well, it gives us on the foundation side a great story to tell. We want to tell all of our supporters all the great things the fraternity is doing, and sometimes that's with a chapter example, an individual example, but at a high level, when the fraternity does well with key metrics, it fuels the foundation story. And in development terms, we call that our case for support. That is the story we tell to our donors that is the reason and the compelling reason why we want people to invest in the foundation. And when we have a good story to tell, what does that mean? It means the foundation can likely raise more funds. If we don't have a good story to tell, you can imagine it's harder to raise resources and ask people to make a gift. Thankfully, the fraternity is doing well and we have a strong story to tell. And what does that mean? Well, when a foundation can raise those funds, we don't raise them just to sit on them. We invest them right back into the fraternity in more educational programming. And what does that educational programming do? Well, it helps us build even stronger chapters and develop even more men that believe in the organization's mission, which then fuels the foundation's case for support the next year. So you can see that the success of one really drives the other, and vice versa. Now, another way to look at this is this interdependent relationship it's very symbiotic and very mutual, but I think these next few graphs really tell the story of at least Delta Upsilon's progress over the last 8 to 10 years. So looking back just over the last 8 to 10 years, Delta Upsilon as a fraternity has really made some great strides in a couple key metrics. First being undergraduate membership. The number of students that have joined the organization has gone up. DU's average chapter size has increased. Now, although we don't have a chapter on every campus, where we do have a chapter, more men want to join and be a part of that experience. They want our product on those campuses, which is a great statistic. The fraternity-wide GPA has increased over the last 8 to 10 years, and the number of students that we've been able to impact through educational programming has gone up. So these are pretty, great results for the fraternity. They're not every possible metric. There's a lot of metrics out there that probably one can look to see what's considered a thriving chapter or a thriving organization. But these are at least 4 that we feel are pretty important. And obviously, if the organization is doing well and the fraternity side is doing well, these numbers should be going up and to the right. We want to see progress year over year. So back to that relationship with the foundation, if this is the progress that we've seen in some of these metrics over the last 8 to 10 years on the fraternity side, it should be no surprise that when you look at the foundation's impact over the last 8 to 10 years, foundation results were also going kind of up and to the right. So what does this mean? Bottom line, it takes resources to do purposeful things. And it shouldn't be a surprise that the more our supporters are giving back to support Delta Upsilon on the foundation side, the more we then can fuel those funds back into the fraternity to produce better results year over year. So there really is an interdependent relationship between the foundation and the fraternity. And again, when the fraternity does well, the foundation can raise more resources and grant those funds back to the organization to continue improving all things. So hopefully that gives a clear picture about just the relationship between the fraternity and the foundation. I'm going to take a quick pause to see if I have seen any questions that have come in from anyone specific to the purpose of the foundation and the relationship that exists between both the fraternity and the foundation arm. Okay. No questions just yet. If you come across them, feel free to throw them in there, or I can answer them after the fact. But we'll keep going. So now I want to dive into a little bit more specifics on exactly how the foundation supports the fraternity. Now that we understand the relationship between the two, let's talk specifically how the foundation actually supports the fraternity each year in terms of real dollars. So when we looked at those foundation giving graphs a moment ago, you may have wondered exactly how are those charitable gifts used. And although there are many different funds behind the scenes on the foundation, if you look at, I'm sure, any organization's line item in terms of expenses and income, there's lots of different nuances. But in simple terms, there are 3 foundation funding sources that exist, 3 buckets that are then used to fuel the educational activity of the fraternity. And those 3 are the annual loyalty fund, our short-term chapter restricted funds, and third, our endowment funds. And I'm going to take these 3 funding sources one at a time. Let's start with the annual loyalty fund. Now, the annual loyalty fund is the unrestricted annual fund of the foundation, and quite frankly, it's the Delta Upsilon Foundation's biggest need. Those dollars that come into the annual loyalty fund every year are raised and spent every year on that year's undergraduate educational activity. And the annual fund is really the fuel that helps the foundation execute all of its programs that it has each year. It's a critical fund. It makes all the programs possible, and it supports all of our chapters, knowing that all of the educational programming and resources that the fraternity executes really do affect every chapter. And obviously different chapters take advantage of resources in different ways, but every educational opportunity that's out there, whether it's scholarship programming, building better men retreats. They affect all of our chapters, and the annual loyalty fund is so critical in fueling all of those and bringing those to life. Just for reference, last year, the average gift to the annual loyalty fund, this kind of gives maybe some context about the supporters. We had an average gift of $354 last year and had just over 1,200 annual loyalty fund donors. So those folks are so key in really fueling the ongoing activity of the foundation. So second, after the annual loyalty fund, the foundation also has a second bucket for short-term chapter restricted funds. And short-term chapter restricted funds are really our chapter education accounts and our chapter housing accounts. These are restricted gifts that come in for a specific chapter. So when a donor says, hey, I'm going to make this gift to the foundation, I want the tax deduction, but I really want this gift to go to my chapter or to a specific project at a chapter for housing. Sometimes we set up a chapter education account or a chapter housing account that can be used for a donor to make a gift that still is tax deductible, but then is directly used for local chapter needs. Much like the annual loyalty fund, and it's somewhat similar, but also a little bit different, the fund balances of these short-term funds can completely be used. Definitely the annual loyalty fund money comes in and comes out every year. Maybe not necessarily the case with all of our short-term restricted funds, but the funds all can be used that's there. And if the funds go away, they have to be replenished by new donors if that is a resource that local alums want to tap the next year. But those local alumni really help, and those leaders really help drive how the funds are used. So when we have a chapter education account that's set up or a chapter housing account, we look to those local volunteers to let us know how and when the foundation grants those funds for educational activity for those chapters. So again, annual loyalty fund is first, it's our largest and most critical unrestricted bucket. We also have short-term chapter restricted funds. And the third bucket is our endowment funds. Now, these are long-term funds that are oftentimes restricted or specific to a particular program or chapter, but not always. A couple examples would be if an alumnus says, hey, I want to endow a scholarship every year to allow a student to go to the Emerging Leaders Institute or to the Leadership Institute in the summer. We've had donors step forward that have done that. Sometimes those, endowment funds, again, are restricted to a particular program or maybe even to a particular chapter, but only 4% of the fund balance is used each year. It is different than the short-term restricted funds where we could potentially use all the money if we wanted. The foundation has a 4% spending policy on any endowment fund that's set up, and we use that 4% based on the prior 12-month average balance of the fund. An example of an endowment fund, one of the newer examples that's out there, is our chapter legacy plans. These are kind of our newer endowment funds, and really the chapter legacy plan strategy evolved because we started seeing many chapters that had eager alumni donors that were ready and willing to make significant gifts, but they wanted to ensure that those gifts endowed all of the educational activity of their chapters. So we call them CLPs. We've got about 10 to 12 CLPs up and running now. And these chapter legacy plans came about because there were local donors that were ready and willing to make major gifts, and they wanted to figure out how can they use those dollars to fully endow the educational activity for their particular chapter. And with a goal of getting chapter legacy plans up to $150,000, that $150,000 every year pays for about 12 undergraduate sponsorships to the wide range of leadership development programming that DU offers. So in the end, there's lots of different buckets that help drive the activity of the foundation. And although we have many donors who support the annual loyalty fund, we have others, it's natural to think, that may want to make a gift that's restricted to their particular chapter. And our goal as a foundation is first and foremost to ask ourselves, what are the educational needs of the students? And then second, what are the intentions of our donors, and how can we find a match when a donor wants to make a gift to make a difference for both the mission of the organization and also the direct impact that often is looked for at the chapter level. So 99.9% of the time, gifts that come in are falling into one of these three buckets, and they're always in play each year in really fueling the activity of the foundation. So that's just a quick high-level overview of the funding buckets of the foundation, and I'd like to dive in a little bit more of how the dollars are used throughout the year and what's the actual impact that happens when gifts come in into these three buckets. So this is really the fun part. So as I mentioned earlier, after the foundation, cultivates a donor, solicits a gift, and we receive those gifts, our next step is, and most arguably our most important step, is to steward those dollars and put the dollars to use. So in other words, we don't want to just raise the money and sit on it. We want to put it to good use for our undergraduates. So here's a quick snapshot, just looking at this past year, of how our donors enabled the foundation to make an impact across North America for our undergraduates. So just last year alone, thanks to our donors, we had 21 students that experienced Delta Upsilon's Emerging Leaders Program. We had 264 students that were able to attend the Leadership Institute in the summer. 56 chapter presidents experienced the President's Academy and talked with their peers about how to lead their chapters in the winter. We had 78 students that went to the Global Service Initiative in Jamaica and really did a deep dive on service learning. We had 491 students that went to our regional leadership academies and networked with other officers and learned how to do their jobs respectively well at the chapter level. 853 students experienced the Building Better Men retreat. That's where we partner with local volunteers and local leaders and design a custom retreat for their chapter, and that's funded by the foundation as well. 80 students experienced the Recruitment Symposium, which is a track at the Regional Leadership Academy. And we had 3 students who had scholarships to the Undergraduate in a Fraternity Institute, which is really a leadership institute for all fraternity and sorority leaders across North America. The last one not shown here is we had 10 tuition scholarships. They're called McQuaid scholarships. I'm sure you all have heard of those as well, that were given out each year. 10 were given last summer to undergraduates for tuition. So in total, last year, we had 1,846 students that experienced an educational program, which is just remarkable. That's if not at the top, very near the top across the Greek world, and that's an all-time high for Delta Upsilon. Now, as I talked about the funding sources earlier, it's quite a mix of different resources that bring this to life. And there are certain times where sometimes the foundation funding for a particular program or a particular chapter may run out. And in some cases, the undergraduate chapter or even an individual had to step up and pay some to make this one of these 1,846 experiences possible. But rest assured, our goal as a foundation, we want to be able to raise as much as we can so that we never have to turn a student away, and we can eliminate any cost barrier for a student who wants to have a life-changing experience. So we're not quite there yet, but that shows how important our resources are and our donors are, because the more we can fund the educational activity, the less the costs can fall back on our undergraduates. So whether it's this number of educational students that we've touched each year, or some of those fraternity data statistics that I shared, they are great statistics, we think, and not everything is rosy in the fraternity, but what does all that data stuff really mean? And maybe another way of asking it is, what's the real impact of the Delta Upsilon Foundation? Well, when you put all that data stuff aside, we believe this: the best investment we can make each year is an investment in our undergraduate men. Namely, it's the men that you all serve, and it's these young undergraduates that are eager, willing, and want a better experience at the chapter level and want to live out the values of the organization. And that mission to build better men, we wholeheartedly believe that's not just a tagline. Like, our society needs more men who embrace DU's values. We believe that you as advisors and our donors are helping us do that. And our goal as a foundation isn't just to make, great Delta Upsilon members or have good numbers as for our chapters or have good data points to talk about our fraternity. It's about life, and it's about the role that the DU experience plays both in these men's individual life and as they go on to be our next best congressmen, community leaders, church leaders, parents, friends. As they lead our world, they are carrying out the values that we also know our society needs. So that's an important mission. And again, it's not just about DU, it's more about making an impact on our world. And I'm sure you all have great examples at the local level of students that are doing that now, and even some young or even old alums that are living examples of this Building Better Men mission across the world. So I'm going to stop there and see if I have any further questions yet about the funding sources that exist for the foundation, or any questions on the annual impact that is happening each year because of the foundation. Reading a question here, one second. There's one question I don't quite understand, but I will follow up with you, Robert, about your question after the fact. But maybe we might even get to it as we keep going here. Okay. So now that we've covered at a high level the role of the fraternity in the foundation, the funding buckets that exist, the annual impact, I want to close by talking specifically about how you as volunteers can be advocates and partners with the foundation. So let's talk about those. First and foremost, one of the best ways for our advisors to be advocates and partners with the foundation is to tell us your local story. We really do want to hear all the great things that are happening at the local level. You know, is there a student with a unique story of how DU is transforming his life for the better? Is your chapter maybe living out one of DU's values in the community in a special and unique way that would be a great story for us to tell to potential donors? You know, is there a student leading a major change in your chapter because of an experience he had either at Leadership Institute or GSI or maybe dual, where he's really putting to work everything he learned as a result of the foundation program? Like, those stories are gold for the foundation, because again, it's a great way for us to humanize the case for support and to really give clear examples as to how our Building Better Men mission is in action right now in real terms. And so if you have a story to tell, although we can't feature everyone that we may hear, definitely send it my way or share it with a member of the fraternity, the foundation staff. We're always on the lookout to hear what are some of the great things that are happening. And again, we can't feature everything that happens, but whenever we get great stories, we often like to tell them at the mic at donor events. We can even use them as quotes in different communication about all the good things happening in the fraternity. But at the end of the day, it's a great way for us to not only make a case for the organization, but also give you and your local chapter some good recognition for all the great work that you're doing. Second, beyond hearing your story, I can unapologetically say we need more supporters of our annual loyalty fund. And our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. And we have got to raise more for our annual loyalty fund to keep pace with all of the educational demands of the fraternity. And that those growing educational spots that we've filled each year, it's a challenge, but it's also a good challenge to have. It's the type of pressure that we want. We want to fund more and make sure that we don't turn away any student that's looking for a life-changing experience. But that only happens when we have our annual supporters, because, you know, chapter turnover and a new crop of officers. I think the story goes, if we haven't said it this year, we haven't said it at all. Well, that's the same in terms of educational development and coaching and mentoring and officer training that we have to do each year. So the annual loyalty fund is critical. And, you know, many folks, it's pretty easy to give online. And many of our advisors are fantastic donors. So for those of you that are great supporters of our annual loyalty fund, thank you. If you're thinking about a gift and willing to make a gift, it's easy to do so online by the 30th, but giving back, regardless of the dollar amount, knowing that we all come from different means, we just love to see more names on that donor list for the annual fund, because it really is the fuel that helps us make all the educational activity possible. So tell us your story, make an annual fund gift if you can. And number 3, help us partner with willing local DU donors. So, you know, does your chapter have a plan coming up to do a local campaign to raise money for a new chapter house? And if that's the case and you're not sure where to start, would a call with a member of the foundation staff be helpful? And I think the answer to that would be yes. We can't do and run the fundraising efforts of every chapter, but we can provide some great resources and some great suggestions for chapters that are thinking about doing a campaign for a new house. And we can partner you and connect you with great firms that are often hired to help execute those types of chapter campaigns. So if that is a resource that, if we can be a resource in that way, don't hesitate to ask. Another way to partner, is there potentially a motivated group of alums there at the local level who want to set up some major endowment gifts to fund the educational activity of their fraternity? Oftentimes, donors might not know that the foundation already has some vehicles in place, like our chapter legacy plans and like our CEA funds, that really are already existing, where if you have local supporters that are ready and willing to make a difference and impact those students through educational means, we've got the bucket set up. And quite frankly, when the dollars come to the foundation, we also take on the stewardship side of things. So we handle the administration, we handle the recognition and the thank you and the relationship cultivation, which sometimes that doesn't happen very often or doesn't happen well when a local chapter does fundraising and collects the monies locally. It doesn't mean that they can't do it well, but just know that the foundation has resources that exist and has engines that help cultivate, steward, and recognize our donors. So if we can find a match, we want to do anything we can not to turn someone away if they've got excitement and willingness to give. So if you find that you've got local supporters that are excited about supporting the foundation, or maybe a chapter campaign is in the works, don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we're more than happy to jump on a call and just start the ball rolling to find out how might the foundation staff be helpful, and how might we be able to be a good coach and advocate for you all as you strive to drive things and improve things there locally. And last but not least, we want you to keep serving. The most important way for you to be an advocate for the foundation is keep giving back with both your treasure and your time. Our local volunteers, you guys are the miracle workers out there when it comes to developing young men. Each time you sit down and you network and mentor a young undergraduate, you're making the case for why DU matters. And that then strengthens our story as a foundation and builds our brand. And we're trying to talk with folks out there, and we've got great stories to tell of real life-changing moments. And we know that there's tons that are happening out there, but they only happen when we have local people like you that serve and give back. So as a former advisor myself, I know how hard it is, especially when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old men, but know that your service not only matters locally, but it matters for both the fraternity and the foundation, because when you do your job well, you give us a great case for support. And quite frankly, we feel like we have a fantastic story to tell because of all the great work that you are doing. So let me close there. Any final questions, or anything that is looming on anyone's mind that you want to throw out in the chat box about how to be a good partner as an advisor with the foundation, or any other question that maybe you had looming that you have yet to have answered? Okay, seeing none, if you all come up with a question or want to have a deeper conversation with me, and I know there was one question, Robert, that you had asked, I'm happy to follow up with you after the fact. So feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call here and we can connect. But there's my contact information for everybody. If for some reason you feel like you want to get a different or a specific answer on something, or you want to learn more about the foundation, I'm happy to talk with you. A member of our staff, we can often be helpful. But thank you all so much for serving, for jumping in on this webinar and learning about the foundation. We really do have a great partnership with the fraternity and hope to continue that going into the future. So thank you, and appreciate you guys taking 30 minutes out of your day to learn about the DUEF. Have a good day.